Alright, rule changes. These aren't absolutely sport-altering or really even hot takes in my opinion, but they are all actual rule changes and not league format, CBA, or broadcast changes. So yeah, let's get into it. Here's 15 NHL rules I'd change. Starting off with some penalty stuff. Number 1, it should be your choice to select a power play over a penalty shot, instead of a referee choosing to automatically award you a penalty shot. It doesn't make much sense that you have to automatically settle for one shot because someone committed a penalty specifically when you got yourself into a great position. Historically, penalty shots have a higher success rate than power plays. However, there could be a couple instances where the choice for a power play may be preferable. You might have a great power play and you might get multiple great chances on it. Perhaps you just want to close out a game on a power play rather than taking the chance that you miss the penalty shot, and the other team then gets a theoretical power play by pulling their goalie, and then gets a more realistic attempt to tie the game. Or if you just don't have much faith that the person who was granted the penalty shot will score. So yeah, I don't know how often teams would choose the power play instead, but I'm sure it would happen at least sometimes, and they deserve the option to choose should a potential penalty shot be awarded. 2, I'd get rid of the blood rule for high sticks. I talked about this in my loopholes video. A graze that draws blood shouldn't cost more than some massive impact that doesn't. And with all the embellishing and in general by any means necessary competitiveness, I'm genuinely shocked that we haven't seen any verified instances of players using blood capsules to sell double minors when the stakes are so high. Someone in the comment section of that video informed me about a scandal where they were used in rugby, so it definitely happens in sports. Anyway, I'd also like to get rid of as many ambiguous calls as possible. So, every high stick should be 4 minutes, and every high stick should be reviewed. I think you should be allowed to flinch, but if you're truly embellishing by grabbing your face a minute after your helmet got grazed, or if you didn't get touched whatsoever, it should be a major penalty. 3, fighting after what is deemed a clean hit earns you a 2-minute penalty for instigating and a 2-minute penalty for delay of game. So if you want to try and deter hitting by fighting, you'd have to be prepared to pay an additional price of a 4-minute penalty kill, or tell your team to keep their heads up. I don't understand why instigating is so arbitrarily called, as the person who gets jumped after laying a clean hit often just gets the same punishment as the person who jumped them. Don't dish out suicide passes and practice the ancient art of keeping your head up. 4, the Sean Avery play should be legal. Plain and simple, the league didn't write in a specific rule against it, but made it so that doing what he did was to fall under the unsportsmanlike conduct category. Regardless, it makes absolutely no sense why you can't face a certain way and move your stick or hands in the air a certain way.
That is inciting. That is trying to get the Devils to take a penalty. You just give them a 10-minute misconduct. No minor, nobody's shorthanded, but you get that out of the game.
Without it being a rule, I mean, I think it's kind of smart by Sean.
I mean, I thought it was a pretty smart move to do at the time, but now you can't really do it.
I thought it was cool. I thought it looked smart.
If anything, Martin Brodeur should have been penalized for his antics on that play, and that should have been the end of it. But instead, the league added one of the least logical and in general dumbest additions to a rule in the history of the sport.
Cole and Campbell said Monday that a 2-minute unsportsmanlike penalty will be given for anything looking like that.
5, at its core, it doesn't make sense that you gain any advantage for breaking the rules, so either you can't ice the puck on the penalty kill, or you're allowed to ice the puck on the penalty kill and the power play. Basically just turning off icing for all special teams play, I guess. Either would be interesting. 6, if you take a penalty at the end of a period, the faceoff starts back in your zone at the start of the next period. That's maybe the hottest take here in my opinion, as yes, the clock is part of the game, but I like the idea of punishing penalties in every way you can that doesn't completely break the game. Speaking of which, 7, if you take a penalty at the end of overtime, you have to kill off the whole penalty. And the overtime period only ends when the penalty does, or when the last penalty does, as it should also continue if you take one during the extended time power play. As it is now, technically you could just hack or deck people right before the end of the game, essentially without game-altering repercussion, or giving the opposition any major chance to score if you're in trouble in the dying seconds of overtime. You might even prevent said goal with an egregious slash, and it's just, well, off to the shootout. 8, if you attempt a Michigan and hit the goalie in the face with your stick, should it be called a high stick? It's a bit of a tough call, as your stick is usually below your shoulders and the crossbar, and if a skater goes down and gets hit in the face with a stick below that region, it's not a high stick, but the goalie is doing his job, playing the position that involves deliberately going down a lot, and it's not quite the same as a follow-through, as the puck is still on your stick. So I think it's worth looking into. It wouldn't mean getting rid of lacrosse plays, just that you might have to be a little more careful with it, maybe having to get a bit of distance instead of just wheeling around and smacking the post area. 9. Shooting the puck over the glass in the defensive zone is something we don't see done deliberately anymore, and when it does happen accidentally, it's usually a very close call. So, either make it a 1-minute penalty or raise the height of the glass. But to go deeper on the issue, again in my loopholes video, I was saying that based on evidence, you could just shoot the puck over the glass outside of your own zone and be given no penalty despite it being against the rules, because I've seen it happen fairly recently, at least 3 times, with no call. And I assumed it would never be called, as how could referees determine exactly what deliberate is and isn't? But perhaps the league took note as well, as maybe 3 days after I was talking about that, Brad Marchand did it and was called for delay of game, which is technically the proper call. Maybe if it wasn't so obvious, it wouldn't have been called. But regardless, I don't think that what deliberate is should be up to the referees to decide, as now that they've flip-flopped, what stops a player from just happening to shoot the puck too high towards the net and having it go over the glass? Would they call it or not? Who knows? So, to clear the air and again get rid of ambiguous calls, I would change the puck over the glass rule to be an automatic delay of game penalty no matter where it comes from if it's not a deflection, instead of a up to the referees to decide when they feel like it was deliberate or not penalty, as that just introduces more ridiculous plays either way. Now, I don't want more total accidents called penalties, but I would take that before referees arbitrarily calling more plays in addition to goaltender interference whenever they do or don't feel like it, without any clear precedent. Things need to be black and white or the rules will never make sense or get enforced properly. You could also call shooting the puck into the Jumbotron a delay of game penalty too. I'm surprised there isn't more repercussions for that other than a face-off in your zone, especially since I feel like that's been happening more and more frequently. Alright, now for some roster stuff. Number 10. Allow teams to dress a healthy scratch mid-game if there's an injury. Yes, injuries and durability are part of the game, but again, say you're injured on a dirty play, I don't think your team should be punished for it. And I would add that you can't use this if someone on your team is given a game misconduct. 11. As fun as e-bugs can be, I would push the last ditch option one position further down the line and allow teams to carry a third goalie. And your third goalie doesn't count against the cap if they play under a certain amount of games. But yeah, perhaps you alternate your 5th or 6th string as your emergency goalie, as you wouldn't necessarily want your AHL goalies missing games just to pretty much always sit on the bench in the NHL. Either that or use veteran goalies who want to keep playing but couldn't get a backup or starter job anymore. I'm always genuinely shocked the NHL is okay with the concept of e-bugs. I mean, would it not make any other sport look like a bit of a joke if random people actually got subbed into a professional game that counts? It's literally amateur hour.
The word's out that, hey, this guy that hasn't played in 15 years is playing goal for the Blackhawks.
Can you imagine in the NFL or even the MLB if they were like, alright, we've got a couple of injuries at this position. Our only option is now to sub in a random guy who owns a pair of cleats, and get this, not only does he work near here, but he actually used to play 20 years ago. He's the catcher now. And seriously though, with the price of most tickets, the amount of money they're charging people to potentially see some random guy play goalie is preposterous. Yeah, they used to play a bit, or still do, but not at this level, and not in these circumstances.
The highest level of hockey he has played is Junior B, which is a step below Junior A, which is a step below Major Junior.
Apparently the league actually discussed getting rid of e-bugs at a GM meeting in 2024, but nothing conclusive has been announced yet. I assume the conversation would start with something like, yes, e-bugs make headlines and get the league attention, but is it good attention?
We've got a very inspiring story from the world of hockey.
Does some random person taking part in a game at the highest level make any of the people being exposed to hockey for the first time tune in more? I really don't know.
He won with help from his signature move, parking the Zamboni in front of the goal.
And it seems the league has started to acknowledge not only the potential lack of professionalism it shows, but the health risks. Finally being aware that they might end up broadcasting some guy's heart stopping after he's thrown into a uniquely intense situation, and then gets clapped with a 100-mile-an-hour puck for the first time. Moving on, here are some general ones. Number 12. Scoring with your head, as long as you don't jump, should be allowed. Do we want soccer crosses coming in for headers? No, but that would be a reckless play from everyone's angle, so I don't think flicking it in for a cross would happen anyways. 13. Another maybe mildly hot take here. Goals scored 20 seconds after uncalled but potentially offside zone entries cannot be challenged. The amount of time wasted on these plays that kills momentum and kills the pace of the game is absurd. Sure, even if it's by a hair, that is the rule. If you're offside, you're offside. But the refs get offside calls right most of the time. And there are countless other plays that affect the game every shift that they either get wrong or go uncalled that can't be challenged. And many of those go without mass complaints calling for the league to be more stern on the basic rules whatsoever. How is it that offsides are being determined by razor-thin margins and 10-minute reviews, often long long after the zone entry, while players can start a dump and chase a meter before the red line. And it's usually not called icing, especially if they're old or if they're good enough friends with the refs or whatever. Those plays are not and cannot be challenged. Many clear penalties that went uncalled can't be challenged, so why so much focus on a play that's a millimeter offside? And why do you have to risk taking a penalty just to get the call right? Things that go against the rules happen just about every play, so yeah, 20 seconds of zone time after the fact feels like a happy medium. 14. Anyone should be allowed to wear the numbers 0 or 00. No one has worn either since Martin Biron wore 00 in the 1995-96 season. It was previously worn by John Davidson in 1977-78, and 0 was only worn by Paul Bibeau in the 1940s, and last worn by Neil Sheehy in the 1987-88 season. Apparently they outlawed those numbers because it somehow messed up the NHL's digital database for whatever reason back then. Doesn't really make any sense, as the database for other sports could handle it. Anyway, surely the NHL's system could manage now, and I don't see any reason why they shouldn't be allowed. And finally, 15. Goalies should be allowed to be named captain and wear the captaincy.
Not a rule that says that we can't name Roberto captain. There is a rule that we can't put a C on his sweater.
When you're getting close, you can see actually the C is just a sticker. Even better yet, it's actually an O that they cut out to make a C.
They don't have to go talk to the refs should an explanation of a call be required, as obviously you could tweak Rule 6.2 so an alternate captain could talk to the refs instead of the captain, despite the captain being on the ice. You could also just make it so they won't be allowed said extended conversations, as the amount of time that would take seems to be the only reason the rule not allowing them to be captains was ever implemented. So I'd pretty much like to define the quirks of this rule the way the USA Hockey rulebook has. Oh, and a bonus one. Opaque visor tint or mirrored visors aren't technically against the rules, but there seems to be sort of an informal ban on them, so allow any level of tinted visor or mirrored visors. When who else but Martin Brodeur complained about Ovechkin's mirrored visor because he couldn't see his eyes. A vote was held where apparently every GM in the league at the time actually voted against the use of mirrored visors, other than the Capitals GM at the time, George McPhee, so a phantom rule that prevents certain levels of visor tint was put in place. Nowadays, the league is more lenient on tinted visors. Many players use them to assist with light sensitivity, often due to concussion issues. Some even claim colored visors help more, but yeah, I just want players to be able to wear whatever visors they would like. Another potential explanation for the informal ban could be about marketing, but if it truly was about seeing the players' faces more, I guess, to sell the personality or whatever, I'd argue that seeing their eyes squint a bit here and there isn't doing nearly as much for expressing personality as style choices would, especially for the youth. Fans, particularly the young ones, want to see players who are different, players who stand out. And this sport needs all the growth it can get, so I think the NHL should accept and embrace eye-catching differences. But yeah, that'll do it for now. Of course, I'd like to see them consistently call and clearly define the rules that are already in place. But anyway, what do you think of these rule changes? And what are some other rules you would change? Leave your opinions and ideas in the comments.
I believe that's a bad rule.